Welcome to Staffing in Sync, panel conversations with staffing industry's top thought leaders on today's most pressing and important staffing and business issues. I'm your co-host, Charles Epstein for SyncStream, leaders in ACA, ERC, and WOTC compliance automation for the staffing industry. And I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Tom Kosnick, president of the Vices Group and the staffing industry's leading expert. Hey, Tom.
Hello, Charles.
Hey, good to have another terrific panel cast. This is number 5 and counting. And today's is titled Building a Culture of Engagement. Just want to take a moment to mention last month's excellent panel cast on accelerating the performance of your new hires, which involved 4 panelists, one more than our usual 3. We could have easily had 4 or 5 for today's. It's such a hot topic, but we had to reimpose some discipline before things got completely out of control, Tom. Anyway, I highly recommend you visit the Staffing in Sync YouTube channel to check out last month's panelcast, as well as the ones that have preceded it. We think you'll find them insightful, timely, and depending on how you define fun, a lot of fun.
Hey, last month, that panelcast was exploding with ideas. Yes. I would encourage anybody to go back and listen to it on encouraging the performance. We had three guests that just tons of ideas. Hey, but Charles, before we get started on today's topic, just want to thank SyncStream for producing this series and our co-sponsor, Essential Staff Care, the largest writer of employee health insurance and benefits to the staffing industry. So our topic, building a culture of engagement, having a successful business is every staffing firm's dream. But one challenge is that every staffing firm is grappling with is engagement of their employees. So all companies, in fact, across all the companies that we serve, face this challenge of engaging employees. Hence the Great Recession. Hence the quiet quitting and some of those things that we see going on. We know when employees are engaged, we have a good intuitive sense. Retention improves, client satisfaction improves, growth and net income accelerate. So today's panel, per Charles' comments, a ruthless selection due to many capable folks that we were looking at wanting to join us to shed light on building a culture of engagement.
Yes, and of course, speaking of culture of engagement, our main criteria for all of our panelists is to be engaging themselves, and thus far, very, very good. We've been successful. Anyway, before we introduce today's panelists, I just want to remind our listeners that we hold these panelcasts on the second Tuesday of every month, focusing on a different topic with a different panel to share real-world experiences, insights, and perspectives related to all aspects of staffing. So by all means, mark it on your calendars. Tom?
Yeah, so let me introduce who we have on a panelcast. First, Shannon Kahn, founder of SMK Consultants, LLC. Shannon is a University of Oregon graduate in biology, found her way into the staffing industry 30 plus years. My gosh, Talent Tree, CLP in the skilled trades, True Blue in the light industrial, Transforce transportation. So Shannon comes to us with a wide variety of staffing industry experience and a lot of years in the industry. Shannon, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes. And Rachel Modrak, Vice President of Operation Excellence at EmployBridge. Rachel also 25 years graduate of Kahn College up in the Northeast, got her start in the staffing industry back in 1997, TempWorks, and listen to this, Adecco, Apex, staffing e-trainer, consulted on her own as well. Higher Dynamics, and then of course Higher Dynamics got swallowed up by EmployBridge, where she is at now. So worked with a lot of large staffing companies, and really excited to have Rachel with us too. So Rachel, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And Brett Cavanagh, president of TempWorks. So Brett got his cut his teeth with Aerotech back in 2007. When they got tired of him here in the Chicagoland area, they sent him up to Canada to go manage a division up there. And 12 years with Apex. I'm sorry, with Aerotech, and then 3+ years here with TempWorks. Graduate of IU, Indiana University. When's that basketball team going to turn it around there?
Big win last night. Let's go.
Once college basketball season starts, we always I always watch Hoosiers, and my wife's like, "Why do you always watch that film?" I said, "Because it's great film, honey." Anyway, so Brett is a member of a board member of the Texas Association of Staffing, and so welcome Brett to Cavanagh. And Charles, just want to say what I'm super excited about today is that we have 100 years of staffing industry experience on this panel cast today. So just really looking forward to our questions and all.
Yeah, great. And by the way, when I saw that Brett Cavanagh was going to be joining our panel today, I said, wow, Supreme Court Justice. We've come a long way, Tom. Very impressive.
On election day, nonetheless.
On election day.
On election, oh my Lord, yes.
What an amazing thing.
You said they're knocking on the door, Charles, and they are.
They are. I mean, who's next? Anyway, a few words on the ground rules before we get to it. During the panel discussion, attendees are welcome to post questions in the chat. We'll select several to pose to the panelists in the 10-minute Q&A following the panel discussion. Tom, I don't know if you want to have make some preparatory comments before we get to it.
Yeah, just real quick. So from the Gallup polls, our engaged employees, 36% of our workforce in the United States are engaged, 36%. Not common to see some organizations down in the low 20%. Now, engagedforsuccess.com, they define engaged employee as a workplace approach resulting in the right conditions for all members of an organization to give their best every day, committed to their organization's goals, values, motivated to contribute to organizational success with an enhanced sense of their own well-being. We know these employees, right? We know who these engaged, but we're at 36% there. 15% of the workforce, again, this is from the Gallup polls, actively disengaged. And how does Gallup define actively disengaged? Those who have a miserable work experience and spread their unhappiness to their colleagues. We know these folks too, right? Well, here's the number we're going to be focusing on today. 49% are sitting on the fence. And so if we can move the dime on the half our workforce is not actively disengaged, not fully engaged, half our work, that's a huge opportunity for anybody managing any business. So really excited to start digging into these hearing these responses from our wonderful guests here.
Yes, indeed. One quick comment. You mentioned that we have 100 years collective experience of our panel. I'm sort of reminded of a conversation I had with a tech company some time back who boasted having 300 years of collective AI experience. I thought that was pretty impressive.
Right.
Anyway, yes. Anyway, okay. Question number one, panel. From your years as both an employee and manager, why are we where we are today with employee engagement? And Shannon, maybe kick things off.
Sure. I think you can't ignore that we just went through a pandemic and we don't have a playbook for how to engage during a period of time where people are at home, they're working remote. So we set that aside because we're all dealing with that issue. But I think one of the things that comes to mind is there are so many different ways of communicating with employees today. It isn't just email or memos. Now we have social media and Slack and intranet, et cetera. So I think in some ways it creates an opportunity that makes it, there are many different ways you can communicate, and that should translate to it's easier, but it actually becomes more complex and confusing. Because what method is the best method? How often? And I think companies sometimes then disperse their communication in too many different ways. And so it doesn't feel consistent and regular, and there's just too many different ways, and employees get confused. It's coming at me in so many different ways. So I think that's one of the things that technology, while it can be good, has created probably more of a challenging environment for leaders. And how do I communicate which method is going to speak in a way that people are going to hear and appreciate?
Rachel, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with what Shannon said. We've had so many advancements in technologies that have really impacted perhaps previous ways we engaged with our teams. You know, when I think about how so much of our training today is self-led, or the development of leadership is, you know, attending online courses, even how we set goals and hold people accountable, a lot of that sits in a technology. And I think that we have to get better at being intentional and sort of checking ourselves of, you know, when do I have more interaction with people that is outside of that technology?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, just as you said, Shannon, leveraging these technologies so we can spend more time with people, not less.
Yeah.
Brett?
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic certainly played a role in it. I'd be curious to know what the stats were right before. I think technology can be a wonderful tool, but also a veil to hide behind, as both Shannon and Rachel discussed. One other factor to potentially think about here is the demographic that is changing. The age of the employee obviously keeps getting younger and younger. We partner with a great company here in Minneapolis called BridgeWorks, who specializes in demographic studies. And the person themselves have different care. If you look at, you know, my parents' generation and what their loyalty was to a company, my dad worked for the same company for 32 plus years. There are articles out there that say if you're not finding a new job every 2 to 3 years, you're hurting yourself exponentially in terms of your personal wealth or your career trajectory. So there are statements that are out there that are public that are ultimately encouraging the retention change. And what this BridgeWorks company talks about is it's just common to the demographic right now. Do we accept that? Or do we try to engage differently, as Shannon and Rachel are discussing? So I think that is a key contributor as well.
Yeah, Tom, I know you have thoughts on this.
Oh, sure. Well, you know, okay, so the technology, the more technologically, so fascinating to me, the more technologically we become, the less, and we're in the staffing industry, for God's sakes, the less human connectivity we have with our employees. Technology, external factor, demographics, generational shifts, external factor. So putting an eyeglass on, we are such in the staffing industry, we're such a metric driven industry, and so why 36%, 20%, 25%, whatever the engagement rate is. And again, I shared earlier how you get on YouTube and you employee engagement and you see a bunch of finger pointing, you know, oh, management doesn't do this and employees don't do that. And I hear it all the time in my roundtable members. Oh my gosh, these young kids coming, Brett, these young kids coming out of school, you know, they don't read the Wall Street Journal. They don't pick up a golf club to network, and all this. We look, all of us have been in an organization, we versus them, and that's like gasoline on the disengagement of employees. And so for me, it's for me, you know, why are we where we're at now? It's you know, what's that management MO, right? What is the management, the okay, I'm a manager, I'm getting my stuff done, but I want to become a great manager. I want to step above, and that's I think the challenge, right? We're not, we have to become, has management stepped up to the challenge of learning how to communicate differently, learning how to touch our employees in communication wise and guidance wise and career advice wise in a good, healthy way. So
Yeah.
I think, anyway.
Yeah, no, I think that's sort of the central paradox of our time. More connectivity, less connectiveness. Second question, as we know, most people don't leave the company, they leave their boss or manager. The challenge is getting to a culture of engagement where all managers are effective at engaging and motivating their teams, which is a significantly steeper challenge today with so many working remotely, which we kind of just touched on. What has worked for you in establishing or moving towards a culture of employee engagement? Rachel?
Well, I think to have real meaningful change, it has to start at the top, and you have to be able to truly see it throughout the organization. And I think, one thing that I've seen work that speaks to that is when you look at the top 3 to 5 strategic goals of the company, which ones truly relate to engaging people more? Is it reducing turnover? Is it, providing more development and career pathing? Because if you can't correlate that and all your goals are around growth and financials, I think you're missing how you get there. So again, going back to just being extremely intentional and aware, and that everyone in the organization is working towards it.
Shannon, thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's, I agree with what Rachel said there, is it, if we don't continue to connect the company's purpose with my purpose in my role, then it's easy to get lost in that. And going back to, the style of communication, if you choose a style and a cadence of communication or a mode of communication and stick with that, that consistency translates to a level of trust that you need to build with your teams. And if you're constantly changing how and when, then that trust erodes. So I would say choose a very, whatever you choose, just do it in a very regular cadence and mode, and that over time, people get to start to count on that, and then that they start to trust their leadership more. And I think that's one way that people can change quickly and probably see an improvement in how their employees view leadership and view their connection to the company.
Brett?
Yeah, I mean, Shannon and Rachel both are talking about, meeting our employee where they're at, understanding the collective way in which we communicate to them, which I think Tom insinuated earlier when he discussed that we know the demographics are changing, we know the culture is changing, therefore as leaders, we have to change and evolve. I don't think there's necessarily one silver bullet around engagement. If there was, it was understanding our employees and knowing what they need, and that their individual need fills the vision collectively as the company. So we're all kind of rowing that boat together, to use a cliche analogy there. I think ultimately what you're trying to figure out is how can I help create an environment for my employee to get on board with what it is that we're doing. We're a tech company now that services the staffing industry in particular. And the rallying cry that always existed for us at Aerotech was we are changing people's lives. That person gets to eat a meal today because you help them get or keep a job. That is the temporary associate. So the pride for the recruiter and the salesperson in taking care of that relationship is a person doesn't get to eat necessarily without your job that you provided them. So the rallying cry for us as a tech company is if our tech doesn't work, if our payroll doesn't work, if that individual doesn't get paid, all of the efforts of our staffing companies fall apart. So creating that rallying vision cry to get everyone on board, for kind of that bigger need, that bigger picture is key. And hopefully that your employees buy into that and roll with you.
Yeah.
Hey, Charles, just quick thought. We're talking about executive sponsorship. Rachel, you had mentioned that, and that is we've all been in organizations where, well, our staffing industry, right, for years have kind of gotten the bad rap. And as many times as I've walked into staffing companies and I'm meeting with employees, I'm like, guys, like we exist because we can do what our clients cannot do. Like to be a professional recruiter is an admirable profession, and so just that I don't know what you call it, just to have that confidence from a senior leadership position that then filtrates down through the organization. Hey, this is an admirable business. There's a lot of organizations, staffing organizations, where you see that that's not the mindset of the senior leadership team. You know, they're looking at, you know, you've heard I always say, you know, looking at the staffing industry like gum on the bottom of your shoe on a 95-degree day, you know, versus this is an admirable profession. This is but Rachel, $4+ billion. What does Billy do what does he do to communicate that, filtrate that? You know, Rachel, what was True Blue? They were a couple billion in revenue or so. Whoever, what did they do at the top that
Yeah, I'll let Rachel
Yeah.
go first, but
Yeah, so Billy Milam, you know, our leader, he speaks to our entire company every week. You know, every Monday we have a long email from Billy.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and the responses, I mean, we can measure engagement just on the number of responses. He will get hundreds of feedback from his email. And, you know, every email is trying to remind us why we do what we do, what all of our parts are in it, you know, how we're doing as an organization, not just financially, but just also how are we meeting our goals? How are we treating each other? And where we're seeing the most reactions to anything we're talking about. And, you know, that one thing alone for some of the leaders on this call, just taking away that if you can commit to that one, you know, consistent communication. I've worked for Billy for years, every Monday. I think it makes a big difference.
yeah, that's that consistency I was talking about before, and that's
Yes.
great. And a very simple, easy thing to do right away. I would say True Blue, Steve Cooper is the chairman and current CEO, and Steve always reiterated in all of his communications, as you said, Tom, that we make a difference in people's lives every day. And truly that I just got paid, so therefore I can feed my family. It was that immediate and on a daily basis. And people, I get chills when I think about it, because people really hung on to that, and they stayed for years because they knew that they were making a difference in people's lives. And I think they truly believed and lived that in their communities. And the other thing I would say about him is that he could walk into a room of 300, 400, 500 people and know all their names. And for someone in an organization, truly that was a gift. But it really made people feel important and valued. And it was a simple gesture, but he really had that gift and ability to do that. So I think those are, again, small gestures that had a huge payoff for True Blue and really that success over the years for that organization.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. Next question. If you were to search employee engagement over YouTube, some videos would point the finger at management, others at employees. Clearly, managers need to take the lead in creating an environment conducive to a more engaged workforce, but employees also need to be intrinsically motivated to be engaged. What can management do to encourage employees to take more ownership of their engagement? And Brett, I'm going to ask this one to you first.
Okay. I mean, I think building off of the last answer, we, you know, Shannon and Rachel both talked about kind of leading from the front. You're going to ask people to be engaged. You have to be engaged yourself, right? The leadership piece. So your question, Charles, is around the employee and how can the manager help foster that relationship and that general thought track. One of my favorite kind of go-tos is an expression that Tony Robbins, I think, made famous. I think most know who he is, self-help guru and author and TED Talk and everything. And he is very convinced that the secret to happiness is progress. And I tend to agree with that. If you're thinking about your life, if it's a personal goal, I want to lose weight, I want to have a better relationship with my son, I want to get promoted at work, you're talking about progress. A manager's job is to help set expectations and to coach to those expectations to help that employee gain progress. That employee feels like they're gaining progress each and every single day, they're going to be more engaged. They're going to be more bought into the leader. They're going to be more bought into the company. So a go-to that I have here every single day is about progress. How are we better today than we were yesterday? And I think as a manager, if you can help paint that picture for your employee, you'll be very pleased with the results.
Hey, so Brett, like personal then and personal improvement plans, not you're not performing, we need to put you on a PIP, but because I have clients that have
Right.
personal improvement, we're talking about development, right? There's training. How do I learn this technology? How do I learn TempWorks better? Then there's the development of the human person. How do I become a better Tom Kosnick? So personal development plans. Do you utilize any tools like that at TempWorks or?
We do, yeah, we do through, I mean, your day-to-day metrics. You had mentioned earlier that the industry itself is very, very metric driven. And I think metrics could be looked at in a number of different ways, a micromanagement philosophy, or to what you're getting at right now, a development tool. So, you know, in personal life, I think it's really easy for people to think about. Let's talk about working out. If I want to go to the gym, if I want to bench press, you know, a certain weight, I have to meet milestones before it. You have to make progress every single day. I think as humans, we're geared to that's okay. That's motivating. That's exciting. At work, the metrics that we start with shouldn't be the end goal. It should be the progression on how we get there from a brand new employee to a fully seasoned pro. And you know, Tom, absolutely. It's, hey, where are we striving to in week 1, month 1, quarter 1, and then year 1, and so on and so forth. So we do utilize milestones every single day, and it's the manager's job to not only hold them accountable, but to coach to make sure that they have those tools. And eventually the employee has to take that baton and run with it.
Yeah. Rachel, what has worked for you in establishing or moving towards a culture of employee engagement?
Well, I think there has to be a piece that we empower, you know, our people to give us ideas, work with their peers, you know, be a voice for the teams that might not speak up. Because I know something that has worked in our organization is a lot of our internal groups are stood up and ran by, you know, the employees on our front lines, the ones that, you know, are impacted the most, quite frankly, instead of just some, you know, director or vice president somewhere. And I think people, when they feel empowered, they're more engaged, they feel part of something, and it helps them connect to the vision even greater.
Shannon, thoughts?
Yeah, when I think about the things that have been most impactful, but for me and for people that I work with and lead is our time. You know, as a leader, your time is very valuable, and it's probably your greatest asset. And when you give time to people in the organization, it is highly appreciated and has a huge ripple effect. And I think sometimes I think there's a tendency to put that time into people in your inner circle, but when you jump into people in other parts of the organization, or as you mentioned, the people closest to the customer, and you spend time talking to them, it's amazing what the impact can be. And they realize that this senior leadership of the company really does care what's happening at every level of the organization. And it's amazing what you'll hear from people that work directly with the customer, whether it's the customer or the candidate. They often have the best ideas and the best solutions on how to move forward, how to progress, as Brett said. So I'd say make sure that you allot time during the week to pick up the phone and schedule time with that person who's recruiting, that person who is placing those candidates on the job, this brand new salesperson who's talking to customers. And the information you get will be highly valuable. And also, they'll talk to everyone else and say, hey, I just had a conversation with someone in senior leadership, and word will spread in a very positive way.
Yeah.
Hey, Charles, we're talking about creating a culture or creating an environment of engagement. I was with a client of mine out on the West Coast, and it was one of my first visits there, and there were, I don't know, maybe 25 or 30 employees in this big room, and they were having like an all meeting, whatever. But then they started doing the shout outs. So they got to the section of the meeting, hey, who's got a shout out? oh, hey, I just want to shout out to so-and-so. They were so helpful on blah, 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 blah. And somebody else said, hey, I want to shout out. I didn't know any of these people, and it was so personally motivating. I said, hey, I want to do something good so that somebody will say, hey, Tom, I've got other clients that, Brett, you're talking about development of the employee. I've got other clients that they have a host of books, 12 or 15 books. And they say, hey, pick a book or let's together, let's pick a book and read the book and let's learn something new. Do you find those kinds of things of shout outs and educational things as helping with creating an environment of engagement?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the questions posed at one point in time, I know, was around like, how do you determine if your employees are engaged or not? And they talk about that in the Gallup surveys that you reference. I mean, unfortunately, there's a reality too of, if they do that shout out exercise in the middle of the office and nobody says anything, it's kind of a telling sign in and of itself that engagement may be a little bit low. Or if you do a book club and nobody reads it or no one signs up for it, it's a bit low. So having those events that you're discussing can be a telltale sign in and of itself, just around attendance. But absolutely, I love what Rachel and Shannon both said around, letting the employee have that voice. Oftentimes, if you set your own goals, you're going to be a bit more bought into it too. So those are great suggestions.
Yeah, just a quick comment there. I was recently reading a study recently, top 10 reasons people leave their company. Number one is lack of opportunity. Recognition is also, lack of recognition is also in the top 10. So it is kind of.
And what does recognition cost you? Right?
Yeah, very little.
Nothing. It's
really.
What was that book? How I Got Here. What got you here won't get you to there. Marshall
Goldsmith. Yeah.
Goldsmith. Yeah. And I had a client that gave me that book, and I read this book. I said, you got to be kidding me. It's well, say thank you to your employees. Don't be looking at your phone when you're talking to somebody. It's like, holy cow, these are like exactly what we're talking about here. Basic communications, giving people time. Recognition.
I think the problem sometimes is that it's not true or it's not real unless we read it or hear it in a TED Talk or read it in a business publication. I mean, look to your own personal experience. What motivates you? What reinforces your behaviors? What gets you to do certain things? When somebody says, hey, attaboy, good job.
Yeah.
It's powerful.
Yeah. I think there's also a very strong correlation with we've talked about development before, but if we as leaders help someone, and my own experience, the leaders that helped me grow, that's where I felt loyalty and engagement too. And I think that we tend to focus on technical skills, but soft skills are often the difference between someone moving from one position to another in an organization, taking on more responsibility. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a title change, but it could be an enhancement to their role. But when we give people that gift of learning and developing new skills, particularly those soft skills, I think that is huge for them in that sense of pride and accomplishment and engagement. So I would say finding ways to do that in your organization, whether it's, it might be you have a salesperson who does a terrific job on doing their research for their potential targets, and have that person share that information and that with the rest of the organization. You give them a chance to shine, and then they also impart that wisdom on other people. So you have the resources within your organization, and tapping into those, I think will also be a very easy way to quickly make some progress in your engagement.
Sure.
Yeah, Shannon, what's coming to me is a theme: management by intention versus management by crisis or reactive management. And in our industry, we just get sucked into reactive management and management by crisis. And you really, you own a business, you're a manager, you really have to, how do I grow to manage by intention? It's anyway.
Yeah. Okay, next question. Gallup developed a set of 12 questions that managers must ask their employees to get a read on their readiness for engagement. The first two are, number one, do you know what is expected of you at work? Number two, do you have the materials and equipment to do your work right? This may seem pretty straightforward, but the answers you tend to get will surprise you. How does your organization ensure that you're delivering on these first two questions? And feel free to offer specific examples. Brett?
Yeah, I think we've touched on this one a little bit already.
Yeah.
At least around the progress comments and the general kind of shout outs and engagement. I think measurables, as much as people may want to resist them in the feeling of micromanagement at times, are coveted. And there's so many psychological studies out there, speaking of proof, Tom or Charles, I forget who mentioned it, that why do we need validation everywhere we go, from a book or from some famous TED talk? But there's so many studies out there that say that humans are enthralled with milestones. They want those metrics. But if the employee isn't aware of the metrics that they're being measured against, everything falls on its face pretty quickly. So we try to publish our metrics, and in certain departments even publish the results. You instantly create what Shannon was kind of referencing earlier, is that employee who's doing it right, with that hope of internal mentorship or mimicry, even to say, oh my goodness, Rachel's doing so well at this, like I need to go sit down with her and have a conversation. Now your engagement's increasing even further. So we definitely publish metrics, and we publish the results. And then the second form of the question there around, do they have the necessary tools? I think first and foremost, if you're going to have metrics, the employee themselves has to have the ability to access those numbers on a regular basis. They can't be derived from some one-on-one meeting or from management. So they need to be able to assess them themselves and kind of measure themselves up against the standard. But then as a manager, it's certainly your responsibility to make sure that you're teaching to those specific goals that are acquired. So LMSs, to give specific examples, we partner with a company internally to do some online training. And then those are reinforced in what we call learn, shadow, do, teach model that the employee kind of teaches back to either their team or their leader directly.
Rachel?
Yeah, no, to build on what Brett said, we do some surveys. So we do a pulse survey every quarter, and we ask somewhere in 3 to 4 questions. And I think if I looked at the questions, 2 of them are the ones that you just mentioned. We're always asking, do you know your expectations of your role? Do you have the tools you need to be successful? I think we probably need to do a little bit of a better job instilling that those conversations are happening, and it's not just on a survey. We also have a program that we do quarterly goals with every employee, and it's tracked in our HRIS, so we can make sure interaction is happening there and conversations are being held. And I think that's a great time to follow up on those conversations and, get the feedback, provide the tools, and end the conversations. How can I help you as your leader, Charles? How can I help you be more successful?
Shannon?
Yeah, when I read this, I think these are questions that you need to phrase them in this format for a survey so that you can get quick responses. However, I immediately think about in sales, we learn if you ask a question that open-ended way, your customer's guard goes down and they start sharing more information with you. And it's interesting how if you ask somebody a closed-ended question, they tend to think they can only answer in yes or no. But if you ask it in an open-ended way, then they tend to share more information. So as Rachel said, this is great for a survey, but survey on its own doesn't change engagement. So take this and flip that question and say, what tools do you need to be more successful in your role? And, what tools do you have today that are working for you, then which ones maybe are creating roadblocks? And then be quiet and listen and take notes. And when you do that, I think you'll see their guard go down, they'll get relaxed, and they'll be willing to share more information because you really want to hear what they have to say, but it's how you formulate those questions. And that's something, again, in the sales environment we learn early on makes a huge difference in the information you get from your customer, but it works the same with your staff. Is you're going to get different and better and more honest information if you pose the question that way. So surveys are important, but as Rachel said, you need to follow up with those one-on-one conversations to really get to the heart of how they're feeling.
There is a third question, but I know Tom wants to say something.
Oh, just to reiterate what Brett was talking about, and maybe we can give this a little bit of airtime, but there's all kind of data that says that people want to know the path to success. So that job descriptions, the flow of my work, what do I need to do on a day-to-day in order to succeed? What are the performance metrics? So I always say that it's management's job to show employees the pathway to succeed. And so I've heard a lot of managers, Brett, what kind of money you want to make? Oh, Tom, I want to make $150,000. Great. Let me show you what you need to do to make $150,000 versus the manager that has a set of metrics on the end of a baseball bat walking around the office, right? I mean, we know these two environments that exist in the industry, but the accountability is not a bad word. And I think all my clients struggle with how do we hold people accountable that's in a caring way, in an intentional way. I don't know if any of you have any comments about that dynamic of management.
I want to know who's walking around with a baseball bat with goals at the end of it.
Hey, you're the one. Hey, you got Aerotech in your background.
Oh, wow. Very fair. Rachel or Shannon, you both were going to jump in. I don't want to follow up to that comment. I'll let the.
Yeah, I think it's keep it simple. Don't overdo the baseball bat too much. Maybe you just need to have a couple of things that you measure, and again, consistency and how you measure that, so that everybody is aware that this is where I'm going to be measured. And you're absolutely right. I don't think that employees have an issue with being accountable as long as they understand what they're accountable for. So I think it's being very clear about that and keeping the measurements to a minimum and consistently measuring them and giving them that feedback is what I would say is the for those struggling with that, just try to keep that very tight.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. I think a lot of people that think accountability is difficult to do, they're probably only having conversations when it is a difficult one, when they are trying to, talk about a underperformer. And I think, as Shannon and Brett both said, consistency, expectations. I know what I'm supposed to do. We're going to talk about it every week, month, whatever that is. And that somebody's saying, well, how can I help you get to your goal? How can I help remove barriers from the problems you're having from seeing success? That's true accountability.
Love what you said, Rachel. That's that reactive piece that Tom was talking about earlier. If we're not holding accountable to the end, it's too late. That's when those dangerous pips come in, and it's a improvement plan, not a development plan. So well said.
Yeah. The third question of Gallup's set of 12 questions is: at work, do you have the opportunity to do what you do best every day? So the question, of course, is what does your organization do to provide your employees with the environment and opportunity to do their best every day? So whoever answers this first gets to answer this first.
I'll jump in. So I think this one's a much deeper, certainly, than the others. And I think, in prep for this, for the audience who's unaware, Charles had brought up D&I and that there's a B coming, and that that whole platform is kind of changing. What I have learned through the years is D&I is more so around the diversity of thought. If you think about building as a leader,
Mhm.
you think about building a really, really strong team. I know where my strengths lie. I know where Shannon's strengths lie. I know where Rachel's strengths lie. And if we need to build out and round out this team, what strengths are we missing? And going to find those people and exposing that and giving them that opportunity to live in their strengths is really, really key. I think this is like the advanced form of engagement and leadership that I see a lot of leaders and companies struggle with, myself included. If you can find and round out that team and allow people to stay within their lanes, that's huge. But what needs to come first really is understanding the individual, understanding the goal or the game at task if you're playing a sport, and saying, okay, what are we missing here? And who do we know who has it so we can go round that out? It may not be a traditional job or skill set that we need to adopt to. I mean, Rachel's role, Vice President of Operations Excellence, is very, very diverse as I've gotten to work closely with her. So I think companies are getting smarter as they're evolving into that well-rounded strength of a team versus strength of an individual, but it is not an easy thing to do.
Mhm.
So Rachel, now that you were name checked, I think you need to respond.
Well, I'll just say, when I read this question, it made me think of that Maslow's like hierarchy of needs theory, right?
Mhm.
And so I connected to, do people feel like they can be themselves at work? Are we giving them that freedom? Are we providing empathy? Because I think that just is just another, piece of this puzzle of people feeling connected to an organization is when they feel they can be their authentic self.
Yeah. I would just add to that, we create job descriptions and then we then translate that into expectations and then assume that everyone can kind of morph and fit into that. And people are all different, and some people have extraordinary strengths in one area and perhaps not another. That's okay. Exploit those strengths, because then you can really get the most out of those individuals. Brett said that very well. And I think about some of the situations that I've come across over my career, and somebody's struggling in a particular role, and as we start to talk and dig in and find out what their real strengths are and move them to a slightly different role, they shine. And so I always kind of in my head think that everyone is capable of being a star. We just have to figure out where they can be a star, and our job is to make sure that we provide them that opportunity. And if not, we help them move on. But I think there's ways, instead of putting everybody in that same box, and that's a challenge. You have to have job descriptions, but sometimes they become too much of a rigid box. So be creative. And if you have somebody who's exceptional in one area, move them into that area, and they'll shine, and they'll be engaged, and they'll give you returns for many, many years. So that would
Yeah,
be
Shannon, adding off of something you had said earlier was how that spreads then quickly. If you create a unique role for an individual to allow them to shine and do what they do best, they become an SME. They're more engaged. They're excited into work without the Sunday scaries anymore. They're fired up to come into work on a Monday morning, and now they're telling their friends who they've become close with at work that, wow, Shannon cares. She got me in the right spot. I'm excited. My company's the greatest. Like, go talk to her. She's going to help you do the same thing. If you can foster that environment, that's why I keep saying I think that's next level. Now you're producing at the highest of levels. That's spread fast.
You all are articulating Dr. Clifton's hypothesis that developed the 12 questions and conducted that 20-year study with Gallup. And basically, prior, we used to, let's do an assessment on Brett. Brett doesn't like to make phone calls. Brett is terrible at following up with emails. So let's get him some training on how to make phone calls and how to, we focus the training not on our strengths, but on our weaknesses. And that whole Dr. Clifton's hypothesis was hey, forget about these weaknesses. Let's focus on the individual's strengths, and they will shine. And it's what quote unquote what the best managers do.
Mm.
It's what they discovered. You guys are you must be reading the same books on reading.
We have one more question. I don't know if we're going to have enough time to get to the Q&A, Tom, which is a shame because some people have posted some really interesting questions in the chat. We may have to start a staffing in sync after hours. Maybe we get a little spicier. We have to discuss that. We'll have to make an executive decision on that one. Anyway, last question. What are some of the easiest to implement ideas or methods that will get the quickest results in improving employee engagement? Are there any ideas or methods that may take longer to implement, but that will lead to longer term improvements? First one in.
Well, I'll just jump in and say we've talked about so many of them already. I think that finding a communication method and cadence and sticking with that is something you can do right away. Having one-on-ones with employees to really dig for information and demonstrate that care and that interest in what they're doing. And then helping people grow, find ways to give people an opportunity to develop not just technical skills, but their soft skills. And those are those two together will help them advance and build that engagement and loyalty.
Rachel?
So I think that some of this, we're putting this skill in the hands of our middle management, our, branch leaders, our directors, and what are we doing to develop them so that they can help, engage their team? So I think trying to figure out how you can develop, those leaders. I love all the things that Shannon said. I think career pathing, I have to say that. I think that if you don't already have clear career paths, which we said earlier, that's one. And then, as we plan for 2023, think about what strategic goals you can truly connect that increase engagement, lower turnover, and I think you'll hit those financial marks.
Yeah, I think those are great. And, the spirit of this question is perfect. There is no easy, simple solution. It's meeting your people where they're at, like we've talked about, exposing their strengths, creating progress or milestones or markers with career paths, having a vision that can be cascaded down that everyone's bought into. This is general, human engagement that we're talking about here, allowing someone to feel safe as though they could be their authentic self, as Rachel said earlier. I think all those things are big. I'll go the unpopular route and say, Tom shared a stat that 15% of employees are actively disengaged. You got to get them out. You have to get those people out. View them like a cancer. It spreads way faster than the positive does. And you have to find a way to get them out. Of course, I'm assuming that you've gone through those other methods to try and get them engaged and get them excited and to that other side of the fence. But if you are unsuccessful there, getting them out is possibly at times more important than getting those 49%ers on the right side of the fence. So that can become really, really large. But overall, for me, more than anything else, just reiterate that progress piece. You find a way to engage with your employees, whether it's directly to leadership, mid-level leadership, like Rachel said, and teach them what progress is and how that could be kind of trickled down to their group. The engagement goes through the roof, in my opinion.
Yeah, boy, it's a big hole in the industry. I think that branch manager training, regional area manager training, vice president, that there's just so little of that goes on in the industry. But we have a lot of sales and recruiting training, but boy, if we could just put more dollars towards that management training piece.
What do most companies do? They promote their best producers, right? Their best producers are promoted into leadership. Doesn't necessarily mean they're the best leaders or managers.
Correct. Yeah, correct.
Exactly.
And that's not a staffing industry. We see that everywhere in all industries. Management training, good stuff.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna have, I'm sorry.
I just had a quick question for Brett. When's that fairy tale story of the Vikings gonna end? 7-1,
If I didn't have my
8-1, what
virtual
are they?
background up, you'd see that all I have is Chicago stuff on my background. So living in Minnesota as a Chicago born and raised individual is pretty tough. So no comment.
Gotta love the season they're having this year.
Yeah,
Rather,
yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, we're not going to have time for the Q&A, but let me just run quickly by some of the questions that were posted because I think they're kind of illuminating, instructive. Are you seeing a correlation between DEI initiatives and employee engagement? And if so, what are you doing at your company to move the needle on DEI?
Wow.
Another question, research shows that employees stay because they feel their manager cares about them. What kind of training, development, coaching do you give your managers to teach them how to care about their direct reports? And how do you measure employee engagement? So again, we're going to have a sequel or an after hours show to address these, but I thought those were really interesting questions. Anyway, yeah, we're approaching the 1 o'clock mark. Thank you very much, panel. That was excellent. And thank you to everyone for joining us today to discuss building a culture of engagement. Tom, I know you wanted to say some words in closing.
Oh, just fantastic. I just love that management by intention. Gosh, the weekly addresses, Rachel, that Billy does, knowing Shannon, a CEO that knows everybody's name, the personal development plans, the whole giving your employees time, casting them where they're showcasing their strengths or where they're working their strengths. There's so many career pathing, a quarterly survey. There's so many great ideas that came out of this last hour that I think anybody either managing or running a small to mid-sized large staffing company would be able to benefit from. So great. Thank you so much, Rachel and Shannon and Brett.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me.
Enjoyed it.
Yes, thanks so much. This panel cast will be available later this week for anyone wanting to relive the experience or to share it. I want to close by thanking Essential Staff Care for their sponsorship of this series, Staffing in Sync, conversations with the staffing industry's top thought leaders on today's most pressing and important staffing and business issues. Produced by SyncStream, providers of ACA, ERC, and WOTC compliance, automation, and expertise for the staffing industry. Join us next month for an equally lively panel discussion on the effects of inflation on staffing. Thanks so much for joining us. See you next time for the next edition of Staffing in Sync.
Bye.
Bye.